Hey folks, this is Thrifty Gamer 83 here, just bringing you my take on what has happened to Capcom as of late with the cheap and shoddy knockoffs of Resident Evil 5 and 6. Resident Evil 6, for the beginning portion of the game with Helena and Leon, was really holding up well to Capcom standards. Unfortunately, it ditched that and went with the shoddy, just cheap knockoff vibe that you wouldn't be too surprised to find from a third-rate studio. But Capcom, this is Capcom, really. Capcom ripped off its own material and just looked so terrible in the process. Resident Evil 4 really epitomizes what we should expect from new Resident Evil titles. Instead, we got Resident Evil 5 and 6, which was utterly confusing and terrifying. And yet, for me, Capcom knows it. People will buy Resident Evil. People will love Resident Evil titles. Some will have eclectic tastes. To me, though, what more did you want out of 5 and 6? It was just completely dumbed down. It makes you miss that feeling of Resident Evil 2, of being in the police station. My older brother and I, we used to, say, hang out on the weekends. We'd get a bottle of Mountain Dew Code Red, a bottle of Pepsi, and that would be it. That would be the weekend, man. That was so much fun. But with 5 and 6, you don't really get that. With Resident Evil 4, yes, indeed, you do. This is the great PlayStation 2 port, by the way. Sadly, I lost my Nintendo GameCube originally. The Nintendo GameCube discs, Anyway, Resident Evil 4 should have been the bar which Resident Evil 5 and 6 wanted to hit. Instead, they became watered-down, cheap knockoff titles, which, coming from Capcom, is this the reason why they're so much in debt? While looking forward to selling out their company, they have just financially mismanaged themselves into oblivion. Resident Evil 4 should have been that benchmark that 5 and 6 had wanted to hit, and yet they weren't. They were pathetically terrible. Resident Evil 6, as I said before, the beginning was what hooked me, and I figured, well, I'll give it a shot, it can't be too bad. Yeah, it was that bad. I should have known after I picked up Resident Evil 5 what to expect. And yet I decided it's Capcom, it's Capcom. Maybe they'll do some fan service and make sure we're well taken care of. Stock us up unlimited ammunition settings. Give us some real challenges. No real challenges. The game is a cakewalk. You can beat it within, for me personally, I beat it within 2 or 3 days. And that was all the chapters completely. Right there. What do you do with that? What was Capcom expecting you to do with that? There were no real challenges to the game. There was nothing that you really had to keep your eyes peeled for. There were no real threats from lickers. There were no real threats from zombies. There were no real threats from the bosses in 5 and 6. In Resident Evil 4, you felt challenged. You felt like you had to find enough ammunition and enough firepower, hidden weapons, to survive. And that is just gone with the newer iterations and newer incarnations of Resident Evil. I pray that the Resident Evil 2 remake is something to look forward to. Having only Resident Evil 1 and 0 remakes for the Wii, that is something that I applaud Capcom for doing. They are titles which I already have Resident Evil 0. I'm just going to upgrade to the original Resident Evil from PlayStation to the Wii or GameCube. Really, as a die-hard Resident Evil fan, as someone who loved the game, as someone who loved staying up till 2 or 3 in the morning playing it, Capcom just thumbed their noses at the fans. They looked at us, laughed, made pie charts, and said, okay, this will sell. If we just attach the Resident Evil game, add in some key characters, that will sell it. That will be the selling point. That will be something we can do. But it shouldn't have been that way. It should have been Capcom just doing the proven formulas of what had worked, of giving us more than what we were presented with as of late. 5 and 6 were terribly pathetic. It was just something you want to you keep it in a collection, but you don't keep it near the good games, you know? You just want to put it you just want to put it near a collection of games which, you know, are kind of titles that make you say, maybe I shouldn't play it, but at least I'll give it a fair shot. For me, as a collector, I collect games largely because of the memories that have been associated with longtime series. Resident Evil 2 was just one of those games I really enjoyed and loved playing with my older brother. And there's no anticipation anymore. Code Veronica, to me, was one of the last real Resident Evil games which actually shocked me with the way it had presentation, with the way it proved itself as a game. With Resident Evil 5 and 6, you lose that shock value. With Resident Evil 4, you got something that was new on the horizon, something that was fresh, something from Capcom that at least resembled life in the old survival horror venue and vein. And yet, it is in vain that Resident Evil 5 and 6 chose to go action heavy over gameplay heavy. You just didn't get that. You just don't feel that excitement with 5 and 6. You don't feel the thrill to conserve. You have to conserve in Resident Evil 4 to survive. You have to conserve in Resident Evil 1 through 4 to survive. Really, that's how it is. Even Resident Evil Code Veronica, the spin-off, you had to survive it by conserving ammo. You had to memorize the layouts. Just like here with Resident Evil 4, you had to memorize those layouts to know how to survive. You had to know where the green herbs were, you had to know where the red herbs were, where the blue herbs were if you were poisoned. Yeah, that's classic Resident Evil. It's something which many games are now missing. Resident Evil 2, the original Resident Evil, aside from really the crappy voice acting, but whoever said Resident Evil, the original on PlayStation, had good voice acting. To me, I miss that era of Capcom gaming, like Resident Evil 2, which was so innovative. Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil Code Veronica, and Resident Evil 4. You just miss those days. You just hear them calling to you, but then you realize they're gone. Capcom sold fans up a river, and now they're in dire straits financially. So yeah, it is what it is. It's how Capcom managed to consistently sell. And sadly, fans, we got what we deserved. We didn't have any other questions. We just said, look, a shiny new Resident Evil Capcom title. Oh, that's gotta be good. There's gotta be gold somewhere to be found. Yeah, no, there's not. There's no gold to be found. Resident Evil 5 and 6, you just gotta let them go. You just gotta see it, folks. Alright, rant, rave, love, hate, click that subscribe button, folks. You're keeping my show going. Have a good one.